Hey folks, this is Dr. Emily Schoerning with AR. I think it's about time for another Earth System health check. The only way we know what's going on right now is by looking at what's happening right now. For many of us, this might be a scary thing to say out loud. Our hope is for as much life as we can save, for as long as we can stay on this ride to save it. And working to see our place in the circle of life, which is not at the center of the circle. That means getting somewhere we can steward that land and take our proper place back in nature, not apart from it. As we strive to respond to the challenges of our age in a way that is not focused on death and fear, but is focused on life. I'm going to keep you in the loop. We're going to make a path. A lot of the messaging in professional circles was that people are not smart enough to get it, and they don't really want to learn about it anyway. I didn't believe that was true. I have a working class background. I grew up around working class people. I know only a moron would think working class people are dumb. Some people, they want to believe that they're on top because they're inherently better than everyone else. And I can tell you I have not found that to be the case. When I started doing outreach work on climate, I found that regular people all across all kinds of American communities absolutely want to explore these topics. And we absolutely are smart enough to understand what's going on. I'm doing my best to get you the information on our climate outlook that you need to make decisions about your life in a way that you can understand. I want to get back to you. This is the best way I know how. I want to share with you what we know about our climate future because you need to understand the changes that are coming. It's time to get ready.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I am absolutely thrilled to have Dr. Emily Schoerning with us tonight from American Resiliency. This is really my honor and pleasure. Welcome. Welcome, welcome.
Sandy, I'm so happy to be here to talk with you tonight. I admire so much of what you do, especially the work on the ground. And I think that the opportunity to talk about the amount of climate information that is publicly accessible to us, that AHR has made more visually accessible and more interactive, I hope that this will help people in their land work. Because we're in conditions of such intense change. It's like, what can we do but get the best information we can and surf on it, right?
Yes, and that's what you're doing. It's and I found your channel a while back, and then I didn't go back, and then I went back when one of our follows, Alan Rollins Switch, sent me a video and said, check it out. And then I started watching all of them like, oh my gosh, I have to get her on. So I'm thrilled. Thank you. Why don't you start with telling us a little bit about your background? I know that they can see it on your channel, but you're here with us live. We want to hear it straight from you. Who are you? How did it happen? And how did you get interested in climate science?
So, I started off really from like more of a comic book super science style background where I was really interested in infectious disease. And that was what I was like going for gung ho until I got into graduate school and I was still working there. And I did work with NASA and with the Department of Defense. And I was at this like pinnacle moment where we were launching a load on the space shuttle. And the next day we were driving back to the airport and I saw for the first time a wild roseate spoonbill. It was flying like right by the highway. And I was so much more excited and joyful and just like my heart lit up to see this weird, beautiful bird. I cared so much more about this than the rocket that I was like, you are in the wrong field. You have to make a change because the thing that I liked the most in my work at ASU was my work with other students like me. There's a lot of students there who come from like a non-conventional college background, right? A
Right.
lot of other
Mm-hmm.
people who they're a first generation college student.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of students there who the discourse of academic English is not their home language, because you can
Yeah,
speak
I got you.
English and not feel comfortable in an academic discourse scenario, right?
Oh, and tell me
And
why. The formality of it all. Yeah.
And we would get all these refugees. There was a lot of
Yeah.
refugees who settled in through Phoenix area at that time. And so I get these students in these intro courses I was teaching, like you do as a grad student, who had they passed the escape from Myanmar test, but they couldn't pass my test. And the
Oh,
feeling in the department was that these students weren't prepared. They weren't ready. They weren't smart enough. But when I talked to the students, they're like, it's the language.
that's
I don't believe anyone can pass the escape from Myanmar test and anyone has any right to say they're not smart enough for anything. It's ridiculous, right?
yes, yes,
And
demeaning actually.
it's dehumanizing. It's a way. I don't get me started. Well, you can get me rolling in a little bit. Started researching communication. I started reaching how can we help people acquire and be empowered to use complex science information. And that's what my body of real research is on education and communication. And I got into climate in like 2015. 2014, 2015, I started working in climate communication. I worked with the National Center for Science Education. It was a really cool place to get on the ground and do some work with just regular people about climate issues, about socially controversial science issues.
Ah.
Because back in 2015, the word on the street was the reason we can't have climate action is because rural people won't let us do it. It's because farmers don't understand that climate is changing. I was like,
Well, then they have to.
uh. It turns out, if you go out and you talk to people, and I've worked with some audiences in very non-progressive areas, I think would be a way to say it.
Okay.
Areas where
Like
you
where
would
I live.
expect to get, like, yeah, like
Yeah.
where I live. I
Yeah.
live in agricultural Iowa.
Me too. New York.
Everybody cares about the future. Everyone is aware of what's happening, and everybody wants to be able to talk about it and connect with each other about it and figure out what's going on. It's a real shame that for some folks, this information has become politicized. And I feel like the fact that congressional mandate around the National Climate Assessment, which is my primary source material,
Hmm.
it's not the IPCC reports, it's the National Climate Assessment,
Ah.
different data sets. I can talk more about
Yeah.
that in a little bit.
Okay.
People don't hear about the NCA. A lot of us who nerd out about climate have heard of the IPCC reports. There's less publicity for the NCA. People don't hear about it because by congressional mandate, there's no direct funding to talk about it. You know,
Yeah.
it's since they started making it in the 90s. There's been no direct funding to talk about it. So you really need like someone who's willing to go full mad scientist to help this information get out to the public. And I wanted to do that in 2015, but like it takes a lot to be able to get some runway as a regular person to do a weird thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when I gave up hope. The person who really kept hope that we would be able to do this communication work was my husband, Mike. There was a year where we had like no money and we had all this medical stuff happening.
Aw.
And he was like, should I go renew the domain name for the website? And I was like, no, we need that $100. And he was like, I'm doing it.
Good for
So
him. Good for
yeah.
him.
No, he has always believed in me. And the professional messaging that I got when I was trying to look for funding to do this, like the normal way that you would start a
Sure.
nonprofit, right?
Looking at
I
RFPs.
repeatedly got, what?
Looking at RFPs.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, looking at RFPs, looking at foundations, because I've had a lot
Mm-hmm.
of luck with other organizations applying to family foundations for funding. There's very limited money for climate communication. And the message that I got over and over again is that nobody wants to hear about this stuff. And that is just not the response that I have seen once I started putting it out there. You know, like American Resiliency on the YouTube side, we're still a small channel, but we reached more than 180,000 unique viewers. More than
Great.
180,000 people have been able to access detailed um, climate information where they can check the source, where they don't have to trust what I'm saying. I try to give people the guidance that they need to go and see for themselves because there's a lot of depth in this national climate assessment information, and you can use it to kind of test the hunches that you have. If you want to look beyond 2C, you can see 3C and 4C data modeled as well. I focus on 2C Because if I'm trying to climb a mountain, I need to climb the first part of the mountain
Yeah.
first.
Oh, it
You
makes
know?
absolute sense. It does. Because when we project what's unreachable, now, or what it's like in politics, we feel like we're powerless, but not locally necessarily. So it's the same thing. 2C right now is a really good thing to talk about. We're going to be living through this very soon.
It
And we
seems
already hit it.
completely unavoidable that we won't live through it very soon. I'm also skeptical a little bit of the quality of the projections beyond 2C because we appear to be hitting a serious tipping point now. We thought that we were going to be really running into like the ocean current pumps,
Yeah. AMOC.
the current system in the Atlantic. We thought we might bump into that when we were well above 2C. But if you look at the current data coming in, 2023 was really intense. And at the beginning of all of my recent state level videos, I show where we are in the current Earth measurements. And we've been over 1.5C for a year now. And we see continued unusual behavior coming out of the oceans. It seems very probable that we are currently experiencing a climate tipping point related to the oceans that I think is likely to change precipitation patterns in ways that when we look out at 3C and the NCA5, it's assuming that we didn't tip, right?
Mm.
So things are going to get weird as these models connect. We don't have an integrative model for warming with AMOC collapse. And I'm sorry if that was like too nerdy of a sentence
No,
there.
we talk. Listen, one of our contributors is Dr. Jim Massa. He's an oceanographer from Alaska. We've done many shows on AMOC. Going back to 2017 is the first show I did on AMOC. I mean, we have been covering. This is what we do. We talk about all of this. We have a show with the Fort Jennifer Antonio Reed, Nicholas Humphrey, who is doing disaster management, getting his PhD, State of the Planet. We do that every 6 months. I mean, so we like this. You fit perfectly.
It's really awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we're going to get to a point where we start generating these integrative models where we can see what's going to happen if we can acknowledge that we've really bumped into something. We have to look at what's the time where it seems like the pattern changed. And it really seems to me like if you look at the sea surface temperature information, if you look at the global air temperature information, we're in a different pattern now. It's hard
Absolutely.
to like looking at the data and not see that in the figures at this point.
What I like what you do is that you want to empower people to understand to how to live. And instead of going right to, well, which I will say we tend to do sometimes, well, we're so fucked. But that doesn't tell us how to live while we're still here. I mean, we're here. All of us in this chat, everybody here is still alive, still living, still functioning.
Like, you have to go through some dark places. A commenter yesterday in response to the Oregon video, she talked about grief as a part of action, that
Mm-hmm.
she felt like she had to experience grief. She has to process grief on a deep level
Mm-hmm.
so that she can move forward. Because you have to look at it. You have to look at what's actually happening. The
Yes.
temptation to turn away is so strong in our culture. And I feel like I had to go through like a really serious low time before I was able to finally do the founding AR. I talked about
Mm.
that my husband, he is the one who really preserved the dream. We came out here in 2020 because in 2020 I just couldn't behave anymore. Like I couldn't do the things I was supposed to do anymore. I couldn't make my young children be on a screen for 8 hours a day. Like my oldest, he was in second grade at the time, and I could see him learning to like submit and cry and stare at a
Oh,
screen. And I was like, this is not the lesson that my kids are going to learn, right?
right.
So we decided to get really weird and we bought an abandoned place in Iowa and we were gonna restore it. We got like the maximally busted where you can still conceivably live in it while you fix
Really?
that house. It's perfect.
That is
And
perfect.
getting it up to code meant that like a huge part of the backyard was de-vegged. And I was like, well, what can I do? You know? And I've been interested in the insect collapse for a long time. And I was like, I bet I could do something here. I wasn't thinking at that time, I'm going to try and get climate information out to tens of thousands of people. I was like, maybe I can save a bug.
That's how
And it
I
turns
feel.
out,
I'm saving
yeah, it
bugs.
turns out that you could save a bug. And like this habitat work, this land work, even over the first growing season, and seeing that there was like this potential for real impact, that the work of our hands matters. I feel like this land work is really what pushes me forward. And I think this relationship with the earth is something that's profoundly healing and profoundly potentially agentic that we can
Hmm.
engage with, you know? And this is going to be my fifth growing season. We started seeing butterfly reproduction, like monarch and swallowtail reproduction, in the third year. Last year was the first year we had the whole seasonal life cycle. The last fall, we were the first time on the migration pathway.
That's
You know,
great.
enough had been born
Wow.
here. It was like being in the butterfly house at the zoo, Sandy. It was something
That's
amazing.
amazing. It
There
is.
was hundreds of butterflies coming through. And you know, the migration pathways are so important in this time of change. Life is trying to get everywhere it can. I see different species all the time. I have friends who I think are very reputable sighters in the area in eastern Iowa. We're seeing quail, we're seeing prairie chicken, we're seeing hares that had been locally extirpated. Life is
Really?
on the move. Yeah, yeah. There's bobcat out here again. There's people who are seeing cougar again. And these are like people who know what they're doing. The need for habitats is so great in this time of change. The I feel like in the cornfields, I feel like I'm running a truck stop, right? Which is a very Iowa thing to do. People just need a place to stop, have a rest, fuel up, and they're on their way. And the first monarchs that anyone I know has sighted in the county, they came back to my truck stop this year as the spring migration is rolling.
Really? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
you think about the how land restoration is so important. How about in cities? I mean, I'm always, and there are people I know that follow that don't have the opportunity to work the land like I do, but they're using other methods and they're growing in their homes, on their decks, on their windowsills. How do you address people that live in cities with this issue?
I think the most inspiring thing going on in cities right now is the regreening of Detroit. I think that the urban farms in Detroit, the black-led urban farm movement in Detroit, is just off the hook. The amount of green space that they're restoring and the amount of local food production for the community that they're producing, it's wild.
That's
It's like
great.
by far the liveliest scene in that whole area. But you know, everything that we do
It
matters.
all
I
matters.
think that the more that we can provide habitats, life is moving. Life needs to get north, and many life forms are more amenable to living in cities than you might expect.
Well, there's deer in
I
Buffalo. I mean, they're always chronicling it, and they're it's weird, but there's less roadkill of deer in the city of Buffalo than there are out here on the country roads. At least
there
that's
are
what we have noticed.
a lot of coyotes are moving into Chicago, I hear, because you know that's like the city that I have the relationship with. And they have a relationship with the geese now, where they're eating mostly goose eggs.
Really?
And so everyone who figures out what's going on with the coyotes decides that they really like them because they're like, who do I hate more? I
Oh,
hate the
geez.
geese more.
So it has to be
I'm saying this is a
something to
healthy
hate.
thing. Yeah, I'm not saying this is a healthy mindset, but I'm saying
No.
that like ecologies are trying to establish in cities. And that in many areas where desertification is a real threat, and that's one of the things that is emerging in some places as we look towards 2C, is areas where the desert is trying to spread. Every bit of soil that we can hold down matters. It's so much easier to hold soil than to rebuild soil.
Yes, absolutely. What do you say in it? You know, the cities are concrete jungles. But so you're saying they're showing in Detroit with community gardens how they can bring back. So Detroit and that organization, which I want you to send me a link because I want to check them out, could be replicated in every city.
Oh man, Detroit, it had all of this urban blight, right? It had these large amounts of unoccupied housing.
Mm-hmm.
This is, like St. Louis is another city where there are big whole neighborhoods that are just in complete disrepair, slum quality neighborhoods, right?
It's
And the
fortunate.
people who don't have a lot of economic power, people who live in these neighborhoods, they have really just pulled it off in Detroit to break up the concrete. And it's not like the soil is in great shape, right? In the Detroit area, the
Mm-hmm.
automotive plants put out tons of pollutants. There was all of the leaded gasoline.
Yep.
So these are communities that haven't had necessarily a formal education in these things, but they learn because we can get access to information. They do bioremediation of the soil.
Wow.
There are blocks of homes that have been turned into urban farms. And for some cities that have a healthier footprint, that have more of a right sized footprint, probably we need different models. But breaking up the concrete is important. Like when you look at the climate outlook for Chicago, that heat island it's like a 10 by 15-mile block of concrete, right? That heat island is changing and impacting the outlook for our winters and for our summers. We would have
Absolutely.
less change in Chicago if we could break up the concrete.
You think that is really going to happen? Is it going to happen out of necessity or is it going to happen because people want to change? I mean, cities, it just doesn't seem, it seems like everything's overshoot, grow, grow. Every time I go up to Buffalo, it's always some
It
new
is
strip
so
mall.
The development is also stupid too, right? Like
It's
who's building the kind of
ridiculous.
houses that people say they want to live in? Who's building the walkable neighborhood? No one. And when I talked with I'm in touch with some people up in Wausau, Wisconsin, which is an area that has great projected climate stability. And the city council there has been working to try and get more housing put in, more small, affordable, community style housing, more walkable housing. They can't find developers to do it because developers are only building luxury products in
Yeah,
that area.
that's bullshit. And all the governments need to that's where local government needs to come in and stop with this growth model and profit and taxes.
The only thing that can push the needle is culture change. And I think that that's a hard needle to push. But if we look at how much culture has changed in the last 50, 100, 150 years,
Yeah.
and go further back than that, it's not as if it's impossible. And I feel like a lot of the media and the messaging that we receive are designed to make it feel impossible to change, designed to push us either into denial of the problem and escapism or into such a sense of despair that we don't go out and see how our bugs are doing.
Hmm.
You know, like we don't have a chance to go out and re experience the real impact that we can make.
No, because they're
This,
busy selling Roundup. They're busy telling us that
oh,
insects are bad. That corporations, the marketing, the whole marketing scam.
it's terrible. When I go into some of the neighborhoods in Chicago where people are really pulling out all the stops to put in native plants, to put in pollinator gardens, the abundance is still so low
Yeah.
of insects because of the amount of poisons that people use. I think that some of it is ignorance. I can't see it any other way. There was a park locally in Marengo, Iowa, where last year we were there in the summer, just on our way through.
Hmm.
And I looked down on the ground, and there's all these staghorn beetles that are dying
Oh
of
my.
neurological
Right.
poisoning from
Right.
neonicotinoids. And these are a harmless insect that even if you're like a profit motivated person, they're worth money. These are an insect that people collect alive
So
and just
we really have just found our environmental coffeehouse flush of the day, which is
it's
what we
true.
do. The neonicotinoids. We're gonna flush them away.
Neonicotinoids are the worst. There's a big international movement to
Bye
ban them.
bye.
Oh, they're a neurological poison.
Are they banned in Europe?
I am not sure if they've been fully banned in Europe. I know that there are some places that just pushed the ban through, but I'm sorry.
I need to
I
get
like
rid of
have
them.
too many climate maps in my head, and sometimes I can't remember other
Yeah.
information.
I hear you. That's how the brain gets so filled up with things that sometimes those ancillary things that are not on our top. Well, you're doing the work, you're doing the climate work, you're doing the science, so you're not going to have every knowledge of everything. You know what I want to do? Hang on. I want to show everybody where they can find you first of all. So, here we are and let's talk about your website, okay?
So my website is an artifact of the fact that the climate has changed in ways we do not expect. When I found it in 2021, the consensus science was that we'd probably hit 2C by 2050. And, the national climate assessments have consistently been fairly accurate. And we were pretty on track until 2023. We hit some kind of a bump in 2023. And I have been so busy trying to parse this data in a shorter timeline format that I have
Right.
not updated my website. If you want to see the updated information that reflects current climate trends, you should go up to the top and go to my YouTube channel.
Here we are.
In a more perfect world, I would update the website as well, but I'm not that good. And this is an area where I could really use volunteer help, would
Okay.
be at getting the website to be like a 2C targeted information and
Hear
populating
that,
it with new
everybody?
content.
You hear that,
But
everybody?
the volunteers that help support American resiliency are so important. All of the state level forecasts that we put out are fact checked. We have many people in adaptation, people who are technical writers who contribute their time and energy to fact checking scripts. We
Amazing.
get people on the ground to fact check to make sure that, places that I haven't been, you need to be able to connect with the topography, right? The landscapes that are there. You have to connect on the ground. And we have the Discord community is really fun. That's largely volunteer
Oh,
modded. That's helping
great.
people connect.
We have a Discord too, so we'll have to do some mutual invites. Wonderful.
It's full.
Yeah.
And the one of the more exciting volunteer efforts is that we've recently started being able to produce original visualizations. And the wet bulb risk video is a short video. It's like less than 10 minutes of learning to talk about what wet bulb risk is, to talk
There it
about what
is.
factors we brought together from the NCA 5 to project risk, because the NCA 5 didn't talk about wet bulb risk. And it lets us see the projected change. So like we're at 1.5 now. Everyone knows last summer sucked. That's because it was our first 1.5 summer.
Right.
And you can see this like purple and red areas on the 1.5C map. At 2C, that like potential killing heat area spreads just enormously. And I feel like without showing it visually, we can't look at what a serious lift we're up against. And I mean, look at how much of California that's impacting
Yeah,
at
a lot.
2C.
Quite a
This
lot.
is the time to get ready. This is the time to get ready. And this tool, once you learn how to use it, once you learn more about how it's calculated, and this is a duration of risk tool,
Mm-hmm.
not intensity of risk tool, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You can go to the link and you can see what the risk level is for your county at 1.5C, so this summer, or at 2C as you're looking ahead. And think about, if you had a power outage, if you had a utility disruption, when you had killing heat projected,
Mm-hmm.
what could you do? And where are you now? I feel like these sorts of conversations are really important to have with people that we care about. And that sometimes having a visual tool is a good way to open the conversation where you have some evidence to present. And the data that we use to make this map and to make our other original visualizations are the publicly available National Climate Assessment data sets. So we're making them
Great.
dance, but it's the same great data that is being used for the NCA 5.
Fantastic. And anybody can go. Now tell me about Dustin. Who Dustin is? He's a volunteer. Tell me about what he's done. Is there any link I can go to show you anything, or is it just something that
Justin is a
you're going?
private citizen. I gave
Okay.
him the first Community Resilience Award, and he was very embarrassed because he is an extremely sweet man. He reached out to me. He was like wanting to make a difference in the like 2 weeks that he was in between jobs, right? He was like, I think that I could help do some visualization for you. You have enough of an audience. Maybe we could get this to like really burst out if we work together. So he and I talked a lot, and he was able to translate the ways that I was overlaying the data in sort of an analog
Mm-hmm.
fashion into digital. And it was
Wow.
so cool to see these maps like appear, right? And he's
Yes.
still volunteering with the community. He has made a number of visualizations, and now we have a whole team. Now that people are seeing that this can be done, we have a team of 5 people who are doing original visualization work. Because after I finish this 50 states project, the next step to me is to look bioregionally so that we can visualize and support the changing landscapes in North America. And that's something where we need to weave together many layers of data to
Mm-hmm.
make an image that is clear enough for anyone to understand and for anyone to feel comfortable showing their friend to talk about it.
That's fantastic. It is. These are really great goals. And it's great that you have volunteers who can do this kind of work for you because it's not for you, it's for us.
It's where do we have to do it together? No one can do all of this on their own. And the support in so many ways from the community, the American Resiliency has very much become a community project.
I
There's
see.
no way that I could be producing these things just by myself. It's really a team effort for everything at this point, and I'm so grateful. You know, when you talked before about where do you go if you're in a city, if you're having trouble with land access yourself, right? I think that this is the biggest issue that I hear about when people are in a place of despair is that they feel really trapped by late stage capitalism. They feel like they will never be able to buy into anything. Many people are passionately called to land work, but they can't get access to land, and then they have to go and work their retail job. And it's horribly demoralizing, right?
Yeah.
And as we move towards the fall, we are currently in the AR leadership group and the AR Land and Legal group working to put together a legal structure for cooperative land ownership, where financial contribution would be one way to earn shares, but we also want to be able to recognize people who are doing land work, where you can develop a legal relationship,
Mm-hmm.
justified legal relationship through sweat equity or through teaching equity. And I think that helping to open up avenues to land work for people from different backgrounds is a really exciting and important way to harness nonprofit structure.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very confident that we are not going to be just an online organization, but also an on the
Yeah.
ground organization documenting, telling these stories, helping people see what we can do when we work together on the ground and the way that the land responds to the care on the ground. Like, this is a beginning, and we're going to go to a cool place together.
So it's not really about intentional communities. It's really not because they're kind of exclusionary. This is about including all communities.
Yeah. I think that we need all hands on deck for this one, you know? Like, We don't all have to like each other to recognize that everyone has something to give. And I myself am like a prickly country recluse, right? Like that would be an
You don't
accurate
seem like
description.
that. I guess then I am too. Here we are, outgoing on screen, but we're both kind of reclusive in our homes.
There, you know,
Oh my gosh.
it's we're in a tight spot. I
Yeah.
feel like the typical working class person is in a tight spot right now, where we feel like we're moving into this subscription only future, right? And we feel cut off, I think, many people from opportunity. I know the food inflation costs have made many people feel like they had to pull back their plans for what
Absolutely.
they dreamed of with the land work. I think we have to find a way to work together in this window because we know that money is watching these trends. We know that land in areas that is projected to be fairly stable is being bought up for luxury housing, for that housing at the urban wildlife interface that likes to light on fire.
Oh my gosh.
You know, this is an important window of time for action, for securing and protecting land, especially on migration pathways, to take care of as much life as we can save. I feel like this is an area where we're intensely privileged in North America. North American
Oh,
biodiversity has been cut to its knees from what it was, but look abroad, there's much here to save.
well, they had the German study about the insects. That was several years ago. And how, what did we lose? 70% if they extrapolate the data from that one study out to other places. So, yeah, this is very valuable, extremely valuable work you're doing, you're starting.
I feel like there are many of us who don't feel super positive about the human future as we move through this
Oh,
bottleneck.
most of
That's
us,
a
because
way
we're
to put it.
doomers. They call us doomers.
When I am feeling like my most pragmatic and I look at long term outcomes that look bad for large mammals, we'll say, the biodiversity that we preserve, I think, still matters. I feel like this is a legacy that
Hmm.
matters no matter what happens to us.
I feel the
Then
same
that there's
way.
the work we do with the soil is so important, right? These are the refuges that life has come out of previously when we've gone through other great extinction events, are particularly deep soil areas in the center of large land masses. And right now our culture is destroying them to build out foundations for mini mansions.
Yeah.
But we can get what we can. We can save what we can save in this time.
Small baby steps. And
It's
maybe,
true.
I mean, maybe I don't know if it's hopium to think that these capitalists that are profiting off of destroying everything may wake up and realize that they just can't do this anymore. I don't know. I can't, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not hopeful.
I feel like many people are unhappy. I think that many people feel a void that no amount of plastic crap will fill. And that the connection to the earth for many people, if they can experience it, can help to fill that empty place that I feel is driving the consumption, the mindless, compulsive consumption that we see in many people. I think that we
Yeah.
have to be able to acknowledge that we're in pain. We have to be able to look at our pain and that you can move through that grief to action. I feel like I have, in many ways, just a very happy and wonderful life. I love it that I get to wake up and do this work. I love it that I get to go outside and look at all of the life forms around me. But you don't need to feel a certainty about what's going to happen in the future to
Right.
feel that happiness. It's about where are you being, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've got a question here, and I think it's an important one. Have you presented this on Halt the Harm Network yet? If not, this is Karen Singing Way. She's also a science communicator and she's a librarian. She said she's going to connect you to Raya and Clover because that would be a large cohort of people that would use and run with this. So already we're networking here for you, for
I
your
would love
organization.
that.
This is great. I'm
And
going to hook the two of you up.
there are so many places where like I would love to get connected. I feel like I'm only starting to get up to speed. I'm only starting to have like a reasonable-ish amount of working hours, and I'm so grateful for the support of the AR community because I am not in a I don't want to be making six figures again. I don't want to be in that life again. I want to be able to continue to eat beans on my plates here. And y'all are feeding me the beans at
Yeah.
this point.
Me too.
I'm in, you know, I feel like
Planting.
I'm in a place for the first time where I can really feel confident that I can keep doing it. I feel like there's no better time to try and do what we can. Things are going to get worse from here, right? We got to get the momentum while we can.
Hear that, guys? Plant a bean.
Those
One
beans,
bean
they're
starts with
flexible,
one
wonderful.
bean, and they count. Beans count. Yes, they do. But I mean, seriously, a lot of times when Jennifer Hines, would do the show, we talk about the most horrendous, awful things going on in the world, and we do it with a smile. And we used to get people that would say, "How can you laugh through this?" or "How can you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you want us to sit here and cry through the whole show? We're still alive. We're vital people. We're out there doing things. We can smile even though we know the
Yeah.
real
And like sometimes
truth."
I tell myself I could cry or I could plant.
Yeah,
It's a terrible truth to look
or
at,
do
right?
both. I've cried out in
Yeah,
the garden.
it's a real why not both situation, right? Like,
Oh my
we
God.
don't need to think that we can fix it. We don't need to think that we can stop climate
We
change for
can't
it to be
fix
worth it
it.
to do everything we
We're
can.
no, we're headed towards collapse. We can't fix it. But sustainability and living while we're here and doing the best we can, I am with your message 100%.
We can't look at just ourselves. We have to look at what we can save. And there is an abundance of biodiversity that remains to be saved and that needs a hero. It needs heroic action. And I think that we should acknowledge that people who have like fought for biodiversity have made important strides. Like that's why we have whales, is because of people doing crazy stuff. You
Yeah.
know? We tend to look back, I think at this time, we look back at older generations, I think sometimes with too harsh a lens. We don't look at the things that were preserved. Maybe we didn't fight hard enough in the past, right? We should have done more. But that doesn't mean that we can't acknowledge what good was done and take inspiration from that. We could be living in a much more impoverished world if it wasn't for the efforts of people who came before us.
And there are efforts going on, for example, in Africa for growing and planting and trees and farms, at least in the areas where they're not fighting each other and having wars. But there are a lot of efforts around the world, and your model could be extrapolated, like I said earlier, to other countries, which is what I would love to see.
I would love it. One of the main reasons why I do the work in the US is because we have very high quality data and because I have the land connection. I have managed to get a hold of high quality data for Canada. I have a Canada overview on the channel, and I'm
Right.
looking for more information. Right now, Mexico is like a top priority and a top interest of many people on the channel. We would love to get overview information for Mexico. And I'm really glad that you brought up Africa and African scientists. The work that is going on, particularly in Uganda, around
Mm-hmm.
food science and hot weather crops, is
Yeah.
some of the most exciting work in agriculture going on worldwide. And, I do have very focused content, very detailed content on the US. A big part of that is data access. The more we can do to expand data access, the more there will be models
Hmm.
for other countries to have this level of detailed outlook work
But
available.
it's a place to start. I mean, you're saying American resiliency. It's North America. It's what you're starting with. You can't take on everything, and we happen to
It's
be here
true.
in the United States, for better or for worse. We are here.
We are here, and it's a very privileged position. We're privileged in our
I
level
know
of
it.
data access. We're privileged in our level of extant biodiversity. It matters that we use it, that we make
Yeah,
of ourselves as much as we can agents of change.
I love it.
I
You hear
there's
it,
a
everybody
there's
out
a
there? You're all, everybody in the chat, you are all agents of change if you want to be.
It's true. I feel like there's so much rhetoric that we're like all victims here. We're like all terrifying apex predators who terraform stuff all the time. Like that's the human legacy.
Yeah,
This is not the first time that we've fucked shit up, you know?
yeah, exactly. Right on the mark. We full of a lot of gas. Yep, I got you. We are apex predators. Very good.
But on the climate information front, I'm still cranking them out. I'm about halfway through the revised 50 states project, where we're talking about short timeline to see information.
Yeah.
I'm going to be completed with that in September. And then I'll
Great.
be sharing, I'm going to do a live stream like I did the first
Mm-hmm.
time that I completed the 50 States project. And that's when I'll be revealing the national overview and talking about how we expect bioregions to change. And I'll be taking audience questions
Oh, big
that whole
stuff.
time.
Good.
And that live stream, we're going to use that as a fundraiser and to share out about the co-op land ownership. We're working right now to identify sites and regions where we hope that we'll be able to get people on the land and start protecting land in the fall. And I think it's all going to come together in a really
Oh,
cool way.
well, if it wasn't for people like you, nothing would get done. So at least, you're not sitting back and we're not just cruising through life, because there are wonderful things to do. And I'm very proud of you. And we don't even know each other. And I just want to reach out and hug you.
I appreciate it though. Like
Yeah.
I really am touched. I think that there are a lot of forces that can hold people in place, right? Like you worry that you're not going to do it good enough, and sometimes you don't do anything, right? It's like it's time to
Yeah.
get weird, is the
Inertia.
language that I often use on the channel. And like, why not be weird?
That's my
This
motto.
is like,
I don't know where I'd be if I wasn't weird.
it's good to give yourself permission
Yeah.
that if we're in such a dire situation, you might as well try and have the best life you can. And I think many people dream about like worrying less about the 401k and worrying more about the land work. I don't think any of us have a cozy retirement ahead of us at this point, right?
Head.
But I think
I'm
a
in
lot of
it.
we feel like trapped by these pathways of success, these pathways that you're supposed to behave, right? And then you've done the thing, you've fulfilled your role. We're on these paths, we need a different path. We might as well try and make it, right?
I like it. I like it. So we have questions out there, guys. I'm looking for questions. Uh, Gary says, great name for a band. Enlightened apex predators repent, cry, laugh, and love. Gary's wonderful. We've got beautiful followers. And I'm hoping that everyone here tonight that has come to hear Emily, please subscribe to American Resiliency, even if you're not from the United States, because the information is it's really good. I mean, as I was gardening, I had my other headset on, and I'm listening to you talking about Chicago. I was listening about Illinois. I listened to the Oregon one. My brother lives in Eugene. That was excellent. Every state video you do is very, very good. The information is second to none.
I really appreciate it. And for an audience that's not in the United States, every Thursday I drop a new state level video. And I try every week to also provide some general interest content. I try and do pretty regular Earth system health checks so that you can look at the information that's coming in now. That's relevant to everybody. I feel like we only have a limited audience of people who really are passionate about Delaware's climate future. And if that happens to be you, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to slam you there. But when we do these global Earth system health checks, I think that's very important to see how quickly we are moving towards 2C. And nobody knows at this point how
Right.
fast we're going to get there. But I like to keep an eye on the timeline, especially as I'm thinking about things like putting in plants that are woody, perennial shrubs, perennial trees. Having a thought about the rate of change related to their rate of maturation is important. When you think about doing prairie work, you need like 3 to 5 years for a prairie to get mature enough to handle serious water stress. If you're thinking about doing a wet-footed or a dry-footed prairie, I feel like it's important that we keep an eye on the timeline so that we can stick that back to our land work. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I have questions. So let's go to the questions. Uh, oh, wait, let me get this one. Okay, Devon, so are you looking for people to volunteer to take up caretaking residency on these lands?
Yes, we have a couple of people from different parts of the country who are being involved at the planning stage to advocate for sweat equity from the very beginning as we make the legal structure. And soon, as we have a clearer idea of where these lands are going to be
Hmm.
and how many physical caretakers we're going to need for them at the beginning, we will put out a call for people who are interested in taking up this work.
And then, of course, it has to be equal and there has to be equality in these people. You have to manage human beings. That's not an easy thing. So you've got to really put a lot of thought into how this will work with each other. People tend to have issues with each other. I spent 22 years in HR. I know, in higher ed. So
These teams are
hopefully,
going to be very important,
yes,
and having appropriate
teams.
leadership is also going to be very important. And I think that those leaders need to be people who have very deep experience with the land. We're hoping to continue to involve Indigenous leadership very heavily. Our
Beautiful.
leadership team right now is 40% Indigenous, and we are working very hard to continue to connect with and work with Indigenous organizations.
Hmm.
The Great Lakes Indian Fish and Game Wildlife Commission is an organization that I would love to spotlight as an incredible organization doing amazing work throughout the Great Lakes region to identify which beings, which living organisms are vulnerable, and pair that information with climate projection so that we can see who and how we can help. And
Okay.
with this deep knowledge, this is a very interesting case study. This is a
All
short
right.
story.
All right.
They
Go
were
for it.
thinking about moving oaks. The Forest Service was thinking about moving oaks up further north. And the elders said, don't do it because that will bring deer up and that'll interfere with the moose. And because of this knowledge of relationships, the Forest Service did not do that. They have a strict line for where they will limit oak transplantation to preserve the range of other beings up there. And the work that's being done right now in the restoration of the wild rice beds, which is not only a keystone cultural species,
Yeah.
but a keystone ecological species. That's like everybody's favorite food. It's every being's favorite food. This is work that has such a long-tailed impact. And I think that we often don't hear about the long-tailed impact work that is already being done by Indigenous leadership, finding ways to recruit and follow Indigenous leadership, I think is very important as we think about organizing these teams on the ground.
Great. I like that. Okay. Let's see. What do you see happening that you are the most excited about?
It's a big question. You know, I think that what I see that is most exciting me is how vibrant a community is able to come together when we see potential for action. And that it doesn't have to be like this fantasy, we're going to save the world and we're going to be fine and we're going to have ice cream type
Yeah.
action, right? Like it's real action where we're looking at the truth. And maybe we will be happy and have ice cream as part of it. But like they're the people who want to come together, who want to do what we can, who want to save what we can save. To me, that's very exciting because many people who do the land work, they feel very alone. They feel like they can't talk about these things with people who are close to them.
Mm.
And we don't have to be alone. You know, there are hundreds and hundreds of us coming together in communities like AR. And Sandy, you have built a wonderful community here
That's
around
right.
environmental
We
coffee house.
have, and it's because of all of the followers and the people that are watching us that are here with us. It's not me, it's them. Or not me, us. There you go.
It is an us, you know, it is a us.
It's
I
an
feel like
us.
as we find each other, as we connect, in this time when things are so dire, I think that this is an important time to come together and do what we can, and the energy is there. People told me in professional circles that nobody would want to study this climate information, that people didn't care, that people didn't want to take action on the ground, and it's
Oh.
not true. It's not true. We want to move this needle.
Even more and more, as I live, like I said, I live in a rural area. The Amish, even they know. They know things are
Yeah.
changing. I talk to my neighbors all the time. Their planting patterns have changed. They know. People know. So even in the Amish community or certain people would be open to more information. Maybe they're not going to get it through the internet, but they're going to get it reach one, teach one through me or through somebody. So
You know,
it's
we
good.
have shared language. We can talk about how we're expecting winter lows to change. We can talk about how we expect first frost and last frost dates to change. This is information that anyone who's engaged in land work wants to know about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even though the planting zones changed, it's not a huge deal, but it has changed, and we're going to see changes. I think more frequently as
Yeah.
everything exacerbates and goes faster because it is obviously going faster than any of us thought. At least 7 years ago, I didn't think we would be at talking about a 2.0 life and acclimating to it.
It's blowing my mind. I have plants on my property that are 4, 5 weeks ahead right now.
Hmm.
Everybody in my community, you know, we were all talking about if we should plant sooner than usual. And it was, you know, we decided together we were going to plant sooner. We planted 3 weeks sooner and everything's fine. Everything came up fine.
And I'm
It's
later.
his,
We're a little bit later here. It stayed colder longer, and we had free last year. We had a freeze at the end of May, which just wiped my greenhouse out. Which I didn't even start my. I didn't even do my greenhouse this year. Not a waste, but that's what happened here. Yeah, it happened
it's
here.
very different changes in different parts of the country. And that late cold spring is something very important. I think that the extension for many people's growing season is going to be at the fall. I think that we may see a more normal fall growing season extension. And I saw that
Hmm.
question you put up there. The Inuit made such and continue to make such heroic efforts. If you read the Alaska chapter of the fifth National Climate Assessment, it has so many Indigenous voices in it.
Thank God.
The Ojibwe, yep, in the northern Minnesota and in Canada, also 30 years ago, more. We're talking about the changes that were being experienced in the north. I feel like we can certainly say that people didn't listen enough, but I wouldn't say nobody listened. I would say that in many ways, these brave voices pushed forward the modern environmental movement.
That's cool. Yeah, that's great. All right, Jean again. Jean lives in Costa Rica, but she says, "Is there a Florida group? That zone may be the most similar to my environment, and I could learn from them."
So we do have a Florida video up, and we have more people coming into the Discord who are in Florida on a pretty regular basis. As we scale up, as we move towards the fall,
Mm-hmm.
as hopefully we get the website updated, one of our big interests, an interest that we have from dozens and dozens of people in the community, is to have more groups for local action and local
That's what
communication.
I'm about. I'm telling you, it's local is where it's at. You can't even think beyond where you live. It's overwhelming, and it doesn't work. But where you live does. And I say this all the time. And that's where, when I moved here, the first thing I did was join the Allegheny County, the concerned citizens. And I was the treasurer for a couple of years, and we kept fracking brine off the roads. I mean, little things like that, but stuff that would pollute the farmland. And we're working on it. We're working on getting back together because the pandemic kind of screwed that up. But in fact, we're having a meeting in a couple of weeks, and we want younger people to get involved because all of us old timers can't be doing everything. It's time to hand the mantle over. But it's amazing stuff. Hands on community work. That's really
We
all
need
we
it.
can do.
I feel like that's how you hold together what you can of a migration route too, is one stop to the next stop to the next stop.
Yeah,
If we
that's a very
focus
interesting.
locally,
Yeah. I want you to talk about that migration route a little bit more of human beings.
oh my gosh, in June, yeah, I'm going to Columbus, Ohio for a conference on mapping technologies and predictive mapping.
All right.
And the focus of this is climate. And a lot of people are going there for climate migration. I'm going there to give a talk with one of my colleagues at the University of Iowa about climate migration. I have been seeing some preprint information globally, like it's happening now. According to some reputable research, the amount of people who are on the move or have concrete plans to move in the next 12 months is huge. We are going to see human migration on a scale we can't even conceive of, and it's happening now.
But why are they moving to Florida and Arizona, the hottest
Are you
places?
talking about the movement in the US?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I was thinking about like the movement out of sub-Saharan Africa.
Oh, I'm thinking
I
just.
got way confused there. Why are people still moving to Florida? This is beyond my capacity to understand, Sandy. I'm
Plus,
sorry.
you're a
I'm not wise
50C.
enough to answer that
I know,
question.
and you're a 50C3. We stay away from politics. I will not make any political jokes, I promise. All right,
Some
go
good
ahead.
people in Florida.
Well,
It's
of
I
course,
feel
my
for
mother
the
lives
people of
there.
Florida.
My mother lives
Yeah.
there. But continue where you were going when I rudely interrupted. Tell us about the human migration. Continue.
Oh, it's just the conditions that we're looking at in the US, they suck. Like the Oregon outlook sucks. It has nothing on the outlook for some parts of the world, particularly if AMOC goes down. This terrible flooding that we're seeing in Brazil
Yeah.
is going to be a hot spot for intensifying flooding if indeed AMOC has gone down. It the conditions that we're dealing with in the US, for so much of the US, it's survivable conditions. And that is a privilege. Looking at the global picture, it's like you said earlier, it can be too much. It can be
Yeah.
too much. You got to look where you are and take a step and take a step. And if you've got some room to operate where you are, the time to take action is now.
Yeah, it really is. What are we waiting for? Collapse? Extinction? No. One day at a
Someone
time.
to give us permission. If we
Yeah.
wait until no one's going to look at us weird,
Right?
they're going to
Oh,
keep.
forget it. Forget it. All right, here's another question. Does the threat of forest fire influence your recommendations of moving north?
Fire is such an interesting topic. Nobody wants to be on fire. Like, I'm not saying it's interesting,
You
like
think?
maybe it's good. But when we're looking at fire projections, we have pretty good insight as to where the landscape transition is more and less likely to lead to fire.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a thing where if you're wanting to stay in a healthy forested area, if you feel like you are a forest caretaker person, we're getting a better idea of which forests are less likely to burn. And I think that
Okay.
protecting these stable forests is an important calling. In areas where we look at this potential for the forests to burn, like in the North Woods of Minnesota, particularly around Duluth, we're looking at forests that have a very high potential to burn. I
Mm.
would not recommend Duluth as the climate destination that many people often hear it as. The fire potential is enormous.
Wow.
We have to remember, even in these places where we're likely to see abrupt and terrible landscape transition, that many of them, the land needs us to stay with it to get through the other side. The land needs us to stay with it to help cultivate what comes next and to do the best we can to keep the river of life moving.
What comes next?
For some places, it's grasslands conversion. For some places, we could get the tree canopy stood back up. And the U.S. Forest Service Tree Atlas is an amazing resource. It has so many species fully peopled in it, where we can see where we're going to move into suitable habitat
Mm.
for a number of trees, where we expect tree migrations to take place. And trees, as we all know, are very slow, so they need our help. If
They
you
do.
are
They do
thinking,
on my
they
property.
do.
They're half dead and falling into my creek, and there's a lot of disease and death on one side of my property. I bitch about it in videos all the time when I walk around. I'm distressed over it, over their
It is
distress.
distressing. It is distressing. There are many states, the extension offices are working with the Forest Service to get saplings out of the trees that we need in the projected conditions. There's a very concentrated effort that
Yeah.
doesn't get a lot of public play because it doesn't have communications funding to help us get the trees in the ground where hopefully they'll be able to survive. Keeping the canopy up in areas where there's enough water for new tree species to move in, very important for local temperature conditions, for local weather conditions. In areas where there's enough moisture to keep a canopy up, we need to help keep a
Yeah.
canopy up.
Yeah. Well, that's the key. Enough moisture. Because the places that are burning. Now, here's a question. So Canada, all the hectares that have burned, will it be replanted? Will this natural replanting happen from what's left? What happens there?
I think that in a lot of Canada, we're looking at grasslands conversion
Uh,
and having it go from tree to grass. A lot of people are like, this is going to be universally terrible. We need to realize the potential of grasslands and prairie for carbon capture. It can be some of the fastest carbon capture possible is in grasslands. And this is a big part of why I'm so interested in prairie restoration is not just that I love prairie, and I do, I love prairie landscapes. I feel like I need meadowlarks in my habitat, or I can never be
uh,
happy if I
uh,
don't have meadowlarks.
uh.
But the grasslands restoration, cultivating deep-rooted prairie plants is a very important way to do meaningful habitat work in areas that regularly light on fire. Because these plants find it humorous and fun to be lit on fire. That's part of their lifestyle.
That's interesting
You know,
because yes, fire
and
has
it's
a purpose. Yes.
and we get so much carbon up in smoke when a forest burns, right?
Yeah.
A prairie, a lot of the carbon is in the ground. When you do carbon sinking with a prairie, it's really sunk. Even if it lights on fire, you've got the carbon sunk from these deep roots. They can be 25 feet deep. They're really intense. They can change the water table. They can recharge the aquifer when we get in these prairie species that are like the natural technology. This is like North America's core technology is prairie plants. And these are landscapes that have been almost completely destroyed. They have been almost completely extirpated, but we
That
could bring them
hurts.
back. They want to come back.
I think that's valuable work. I do. No matter what people say about, well, we have this, that, the other thing, time is limited. We have no crystal ball. And so anything that can help and bring back biodiversity is critical.
It's wonderful to go out, like I'm sure that you've gotten the occasional like depressing or gross comment.
I make
And that's
depressing
like
and gross videos at times. Very doomy.
I feel like it's important to be gross sometimes. Like you can't like the world is kind of a gross place.
Yeah, it
But
is.
sometimes I'll run across something that it's just like too much for me. And
Yeah,
it's really important to go outside when I feel like at my lowest, when I feel like nothing that I do can matter. Nobody had a house out there, like this is where they live. And they have that place to live because of the land work.
right. It's amazing. I've
Their
enjoyed
life
this so much.
matters.
This is so
This has been really
enjoyable.
cool.
It really
Thank you
has.
for spending this time with me. This
Uh,
has been really fun.
we could just go on and on. We've got so many people watching. Tonight we've got 173 total between all the platforms. I want to do a quick thank you to the people that are so generous for us. And thank you Veg for your lovely donation. And thank you Chaz. Thank you so much. And Nadia, are there climate death estimates yet? Droughts, aquifer depletion, soil degradation, loss, crop heat death, and more are very certain to cause giga famine. How many, whom, and when will they retaliate? Woo! Now, Nadia
That is
is,
a complex
it
question.
is, and she's a complex, amazingly bright person who participates in our Discord quite a bit.
I'm trying to think about how to break it down because you got a lot of factors to look at there. I would say that with the
Another
available
video.
data, there's a lot that you could put
Yeah.
together from the available data to give you some approximations on that. In turn, I'm always interested in what the military says about climate.
Ah,
And the US military sees climate change as the major threat to America's national interests. If you look at the DoD's public facing information on climate,
yep.
it is very intense. And it is known that the DoD thinks that if we had a grid down scenario
Hmm.
where, we had a big Carrington event or something, took out all the electronics, that a surprising majority of Americans would be dead inside a month because of how dependent we are on electronic systems. When you talk about that last line in that question about retaliation, I think we forget how fragile we are, and that if things get really messed up, the retaliation window is kind of narrow, right?
Wow. Yeah. That's kind of scary.
And like the military doesn't say this because they like want the majority of Americans to die. They see most people in a Carrington type collapse scenario as being very vulnerable. And I think that that's a reasonable assessment of how vulnerable we really are if we had an abrupt situation like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. And thank you, Jason, for your generous super chat also. What a generous bunch of people. I love everybody that comes here to our followers. And you know what? I think that our channels are going to become intermeshed somehow. I'm sending everybody over there when there are questions and I don't have the answers, or maybe even my guests don't. We're sending them over to you. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, here's another
I
one.
am so down for it.
Cynthia, the Willamette Valley
It's
is
going
doomed,
to
huh?
change.
It's gonna.
Cynthia, it's going to change in a substantial way. I know for many people, the pine cover there is an important part of the character. We're looking at a serious long term hydrology change in the Willamette Valley. If you check out the video, you'll see what you're looking at. The conditions on the other side of the change look survivable, but this is going to be a rough fucking ride. Sandy, I'm sorry, I'm swearing
No,
too much
listen.
here.
No, you're not.
People,
This is fine.
it's going to be really important not to abandon the Willamette Valley because this level of landscape change the Willamette Valley is looking at, we could see exposed soil, and that's some of the most beautiful soil in the world. in the
Wow.
Willamette Valley. We could see that soil be exposed. That could create a dust bowl that would make the 30s look like a humorous prelude to the 2030s. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s was a preventable natural disaster. We can learn from that. We can stay attached to the land even in these times of hardship and care for the soil of the Willamette Valley. I
Mm.
feel like I just don't know if doomed is the word for it when there
Well,
are things we can do in the outcome. Change is locked in, but our response to
yeah,
change isn't.
I like that because change is locked in, and that's why they call that the doomer is floated around all the time. But I say proactive doomers because there is always something to do, even if it's out in my yard, even if it's planting that bean.
We get sold a lot of lines about carbon drawdown technology.
Ugh,
There's so much
jeez,
investment in carbon drawdown technology. None
bunch
of
of
it
crap.
works.
Of course it doesn't. It's
The
just some
only
money
thing
grab.
that would work, and a thing that really could work, would be serious land use change. Our best bet would be serious land use change. I don't know if we're going to do it,
All right.
but talking about the impossibility of it so that we never try seems lame,
How
you
about
know?
algae? We had a guest, Drew Hempel. He's here in the chat. He's convinced that algae is the way. Do you have any information on algae, or I'll have to send you the show I did with him,
Oh,
some of
I'd
the
be
links.
totally interested to watch
Okay,
the show. I think that
the
algae
links.
is a very interesting part of the solution, and I think that we do not know enough in the public about marine microbiology. I
Yeah.
feel like the ocean is alive, right? The ocean is alive in the same way that the soil is alive,
Mm-hmm.
and that we have a very poor understanding about that, about the photosynthetic functions of the ocean, about the ocean's relationship with atmospheric gas exchange. If I could like wave a magic wand and dump a bunch of research money into anything, it would be ocean microbiology and ocean studies.
Well,
I think that's where a lot of
that's why we have Jim Massa. He's coming back, I think, the 14th. So he will be here to talk about all those ocean changes. And we've done many shows on those topics, and he's very concerned. He's
it's
really
so
concerned.
important.
Yeah.
It's so important. The changes in the ocean have been greater so far than the changes in the land. If you have any friends who are marine biologists, because you can see it on them. It's so hard for people who are looking at the change in the oceans. But if we don't know, if we don't understand, how do we know what to do?
Really. So that's where you come in. You are the climate educator. You are the person. So how do we know what to do? That's what American Resiliency is about.
We're trying to do our best. We're trying to share the highest consensus information. We're trying to share the degree of certainty or uncertainty, and we're trying to work together to make a path forward. As we move into this time of change, we have these signs that we've hit tipping points, right? We are
Yes.
looking at unusual changes. So we should expect models to have lower level of certainty moving forward, especially until we begin integrative modeling. We just have to do our best. We have to have some humility. We have to check in on the ground and see if stuff actually makes sense. Hear back from ground practitioners. Is this stuff actually working? It's a community process. It's a communication process. It's an action process. And I hope that American Resiliency can be an important place in that network. We want to try and get you the best information that we can.
And we hope so too. So why don't is there anything else that you want to say goodbye to everybody? Because this has been a wonderful discussion for me. And I hope everybody in the chat will definitely go to Emily's channel and her website. Please subscribe, get involved if you'd like to get involved. This is one of the most earthy organizations I've come across. We have another super chat. Nadia, Again, okay. Also, the anaerobic bacteria that emit hydrogen sulfide in Canfield oceans. I wonder if that is well understood enough to deem unlikely.
Nadia, I want to talk with you about anaerobes sometimes.
Well,
Like
join
that's
our
my,
Discord. She's in there all the
oh,
time.
I should get on there.
Yeah.
I'm just so glad to have a chance to talk with you, Sandy. This has been a really fun conversation. And for everybody watching, I really appreciate your time and your care with these issues, and I care about your action. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing on the ground as we try and move forward in these difficult times.
Yeah.
It's hard to move forward, but it's the
It
only way
is.
that we can change anything. And I think the local changes are important.
Thank you. And that's without having to look at the big picture. It's the little changes that we make that could add up. And I believe that. So thank you very
It's the
much.
only way you build a migration path is a lot of little spaces.
And there's, I'm going to start thinking about that. Migration paths. The words for the night. Emily's migration paths. Yay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Good night. And thank you for coming. We really, really do appreciate having you. And I will see you on Tuesday night, guys. Have a wonderful, in the United States, Memorial Day weekend. And I'm not going to make the joke I was going to make because it's political. Oh, well. Just enjoy, if any of you are working and have off. Enjoy the weekend. Emily, thank you. Stick around if you want. I'm going to do the end. Good night, everyone.
Sounds great, Sandy. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.